So I'm going to focus on creating e-learning content because that is, well, that's what we do at HowNow. So I will basically break it down into 3 sections. So you've got your instructional designing, your scripting, your visual design, and your development of the content. Unfortunately, it's not as lovely as a nice cake, but felt like a nice visual to use. So starting with your scripting and your instructional design. Before you kind of start scripting at all, there are some things that you kind of need to think about and kind of set as much as possible, so that you can kind of prevent having to make changes further down the line that can obviously cost extra time. So obviously you want to start with your topic, your title, kind of the general topic. So you then also want to check your audience, because that's going to inform a lot of your decisions further down the line, from scripting and everything. Once you've set your audience, you also want to look at your learning objectives, which are also informed by your audience. So you want them to be kind of relevant, clear, and measurable. So you kind of want a relevant verb, so I don't know, describe, or anything like that. The kind of actions that they're going to want to be able to do as the outcome, and then some success criteria, kind of what it looks like when they are achieving that learning objective. You also want to kind of figure out your overall content and structure, so creating like a scoping document or a treatment or whatever you might call it, that kind of sets out, will also include things like the audience and learning objectives, but then sets out kind of your content broken down into the kind of overall sections, then broken down further into smaller topics, and also kind of how you're going to deliver that content, and a very brief overview of what specific content will be going in there. To do that, sometimes you'll need to work with an SME to figure out the content that's going to go in. So that can be kind of, I don't know, conversations and note-taking, getting general input and resources from them, or literally getting all of that content that you're going to then need to present from the SME. To kind of get effective content from an SME can be difficult sometimes, depending on, you know, who you're working with and the context in which you're working with them. So sometimes it can help to provide literally like a template that breaks down what information you need, and a general kind of order to help them present the information to you. It helps to explain exactly what you're trying to achieve with the piece of learning, so that they can also then understand a little bit more of how to present that information to you. And also you want to figure out what success looks like in your course before you start scripting. So that can inform a lot of things, including like whether or not you include something like a quiz at the end, because if you want have to adhere to certain requirements, you know, like if you're getting certification from CPD or IELTS approval, they might require a quiz, or it might be that it's a purely skills or behavioural change, and you might actually want to measure that over a longer period of time, and it might be something a manager might need to do, but you kind of need to figure that out before you start writing your content. So when you get onto writing, you want to write for your topic, which sounds very basic, but it's not just about your content, it's about like your tone. For example, you might want to inject some humour if it's a kind of more laid back topic, but then if it's very serious, obviously you might not want to do that. That'll also inform, you know, the kind of terminology that you use, and things like that. You want to write for your audience. If you're creating a piece of e-learning for somebody who's brand new into your company, then using a bunch of jargons and company-specific acronyms isn't really going to help. They're going to expend a load of cognitive energy trying to figure out what they mean, rather than actually taking in the information that you're trying to present to them. It can also inform things like your tone, that humour, whether or not you include that, and also kind of how much detail you provide. the tool that you'll be using. So I find that depending on what tool I'm using, the way I format my scripts or the information that I provide in them can be adjusted to make it a little bit easier when we get to the development stage. For example, Evolve obviously has quite a set layout and specific information that's included. So the way you kind of like number your topics or your pages or whatever in your script can correlate to what it is in the tool. What information you provide outside of, just the title and the content and images, whether you need to add, or we need to add in a button here, for example, if it's not an automatic thing added by the tool. Your voice, so obviously a lot of companies have specific brands which should be taken into account. You want to be cohesive for the company that you're working for, and also any requirements, again back to if you're getting certification or approval, you need to make sure that what you're writing fits in with those. Otherwise, obviously, you're going to end up needing to make a lot of changes further down the line. So you also want to consider so your assessment. So like I said, if it's not specific requirements, whether or not you include an assessment is up to you. So like the example I gave before, if you've got skills or behaviour-based things that you're trying to convey, then you want to maybe consider a longer term assessment or something outside, actually in the workplace, in context, rather than just a quiz at the end. So for a lot of our courses specifically, we don't include assessments unless it's necessary, because we prefer to include it kind of throughout as like a formative assessment rather than a summative at the end, memory recall kind of thing. Storytelling does have a good place in learning. It kind of helps provide context. It helps kind of cement the information in your mind, and kind of give users a connection to the content, something they can identify with. So it has a really good place. Like, our lives, just as a, I don't know, the way I think of it, it's like our lives are a series of stories, and so we're kind of wired to remember stories rather than just being, given a bunch of facts and figures and expected to remember them. And also active versus passive learning, getting your learners to think before you give them the information. For example, linking it to the storytelling, you can give like a scenario, ask them how they would act in that situation, and then give them the information afterwards. But that active piece just kind of gets them, again, learning, considering how much they actually already do know, and also helping them, if you're linking it to something like a scenario, linking it again to something with context. When it comes to visual design, it's not just about a nice picture on the screen, it's kind of how your learner interacts with your content. So your typeface, your colours, your layout, and your navigation. Can include the pretty pictures as well, but it's about conveying that information in a way that the learner kind of can be engaged. So when it comes to actually all of these things, accessibility plays a big part in kind of your choices, or should play a big part in your choices. So things like typeface, the size, colour, and actual font that you use for your text is all really important. If you've just got a different font on every page, it's probably going to be a bit jarring as you move through the course. For accessibility, consider a minimum font size. I think the WCAG standards, I think large text is a minimum size 14, and we certainly don't go below that for accessibility. And also sans serif fonts tend to be easier to read. Your colours, you might have brand guidelines to stick to, but think about how you use those, and make sure that there's sufficient contrast between text and backgrounds, and the images that you use, if they're not just decorative, make sure they also have a good contrast with the background. Your layout, group pieces of information or elements that are relevant to help people make those connections. but also kind of lay things out in a logical way. Like, for example, a general rule is for us, kind of have your title, your content, your body text, and then any instruction that you need to give. Obviously, it's just logical. Kind of, you read the you find out what the topic is, you read the information, and then you figure out what you've got to do next. And then your navigation. Think about your menu system. Obviously, a lot of tools have inbuilt menu systems, but then you can customize them a bit. So do you want people to have to go back to a main page as a menu to move through the course? Do you want it to be static on the screen? Do you want it to be hidden until the learner selects it? Where's your menu button going to go? But also don't make it too complicated. You don't need to have to be able to move through that menu between every single interaction or piece of information that you're going to give, and that can be counterproductive. And your buttons as well, so navigation buttons like your next and continue and submit or anything like that, try to keep those consistent throughout the course in terms of their shape, colour, style, and also as much as possible, because obviously depending on how your pages are set up, the position that they are on the screen. And also, again, when it comes to layout, make sure that the position is logical. Most of the time, they're probably going to make the most sense at the bottom of the screen, especially if they're navigation buttons. And then continue onto your visual development. Onto your development is actually a smaller part, but there are still things you need to consider. So your tool is something you're going to want to decide before you script or come up with your structure, because obviously that will inform a lot of things. But what tool kind of best suits your needs? Do you need responsiveness? Do you need to be able to build your content really quickly? So what are you going to use? Maybe Rise or Evolve if you've got pre-made templates. Obviously, themes, so making themes can sometimes be quite time consuming in Evolve. Or do you want it to be more customizable, in which case do you want to use like Storyline? Consider making prototypes for like functionality and things, so that can be especially helpful if there's a chance that like the content or formatting or style or something is likely to change still further down the line. Obviously, working with different areas of a business or SMEs and things, sometimes it's not just as simple as kind of going through each stage in a linear way. Sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth. So sometimes prototypes can help kind of prevent having to make too many time-consuming changes a little bit further down the line. And also testing. Test throughout for the functionality to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. Also test it thoroughly at the end. Make sure somebody else tests it, maybe somebody else if you can. Try to break it basically, and to make sure that it's as robust as possible before it's launched, because you don't want to launch a course to 1,000 people that needs to be taken for compliance reasons, and then find out once it's gone out that actually it doesn't work. And really important, I think, for development is accessibility. So things like for images, for decorative images, it's not so much a problem, but alt text is really important for images, and I'm pretty sure every tool I've ever worked with has provided that ability to add it, an explanation of what, or description of what the image is conveying. For audio and visual content, think things like closed captions, audio descriptions for videos if it's possible. Try not to have like too many automatic moving parts on a screen, because that can be distracting, especially for those who are neurodivergent. But also think about sorry, my brain's gone completely blank. Alternatives. So for example, if you've got video content, consider providing a transcript so that it can be read at a later time, or rather than closed captions, or as well as closed captions. And also colours, so I've already mentioned colour contrast, but also do make sure that you're not using colour on its own to convey information. So you can use it for things like creating themes and stuff between content, but not to actually tell someone something. So if you've got a disabled state or a completion state, don't just grey it out. For like a disabled state, add a padlock. For a completion state, add a tick as well. For like getting something wrong or right, use a tick or a cross, something that's obvious to somebody like at a glance, rather than just using like green or red to convey that they've got it wrong or right. I think that is everything on my presentation.
Yeah.
So I have got an example of a course that we have.
Yeah. And Rebecca, I'm a little bit conscious of time, so if you could maybe just flag some of the key elements you just mentioned through it, you know, like especially the content and the course creation, kind of in the example, that'd be great.
Yes, yeah. So sorry, I will just very quickly swap my screen. So can you see the course?
Yeah, it should be Kanban methodology.
That's it, yeah.
Cool.
So one example, we have a menu system that you can get from any page. You just click it in the top left-hand corner, basic burger menu. You can also navigate from the beginning to like our downloadable content, specific screens. So we have closed captions. Sorry if you can hear that. And then once you've completed every scene, basically we bring the menu up automatically so people know what they're doing. So the continue button will match all the other buttons that we've got going through the course here. So obviously the begin button matches the continue button. Those videos basically started providing a story to provide this context for people. We have your title, content, instruction. And if I just quickly move through, we have the start of a formative assessment question. So basically we're asking people, based on this scenario, how would they organise a Kanban board? So this is one of our quizzes, one of our courses that doesn't have a quiz at the end, but instead we have things like this throughout the course to help embed that information.